With everything going on, I could have picked any number of topics. This time I want to talk about something that some people think is a chicken and egg kind of problem. In reality, it's pretty obvious what came first. There are so many people out there, and I guess part of this was fueled by what President Obama said. But there are so many people out there that think that there's successful business because there's a highway, there's a railroad, or there is a bridge. And it is true that when you ship a product from a business, it goes on a roadway or a railway and but it's still a mistake to think that the roadway is responsible for the business being there. This is just another sneaky way that proponents of big government are trying to justify big government. The the idea that government drives anything is a false one. They talk of government money. None of it is government money. It is all private sector money. Taxes are collected from the private sector. A thriving private sector is what allowed us to build all of these roads. Government does not build anything. Government does not build wealth. People working in private industry that is producing usable items is what builds wealth. Part of that wealth is taxed, and roads are built with those taxes. The military is funded with those taxes. It is really twisted when people say that we want all this protection, we want this high standard of living, but then we complain when the government taxes us to provide that standard of living. The government does not provide that standard of living. Again, the people working and producing usable products is what provides that standard of living. A few things we do farm out to the government to build, such as highways, but it's still funded by the private sector. There's just no way around that. And of course, we're whining, as the left says, about the money spent on that, because increasingly it's being spent in a more and more wasteful way. My home state, and I currently live in my home state, is a great example of just this problem. The state assembly in California is raising taxes, or they want to raise taxes on gasoline because the roads in California are crumbling. Problem is that the money that they already collect in gasoline taxes has not been going to maintain the roads. That's why they're crumbling. And yet they want more money. They're pouring the highway fund into the general fund, and it's just going down a rat hole. It's insane that they're asking us for more, and they do this time and time again. They always want more tax money when they don't even spend what they have responsibly. And there actually was someone from the government because they were talking about raising vehicle registration fees, and during the public comment period, someone said, we just can't afford this. Many of us cannot afford this. And that person from the DMV actually had the gall to say to the person that raised this concern, well, you have to learn to budget better within your own family. Now that is really, really hypocritical of someone in government who they never live within a budget to tell that to someone. And in this state of California, the state that is actually pushing to provide health insurance to illegal aliens, it's going to be another drain on the budget. The See, that's another thing. That is why we aren't building infrastructure. You know, it's been quite a while ago, but the American Society of Civil Engineers said it'd take about $2 trillion to upgrade all the infrastructure across the nation, highways and whatnot. $2 trillion. Think if we actually spent $2 trillion on infrastructure. It could be done for $2 trillion. Obama has run up several trillion dollars in a deficit. Where did all that money go? For what Obama has run up in deficits, or in debt rather, what Obama has run up in debt in his time in office could have paid for all the infrastructure work 3 times over. Where is all this money going? See, that's the thing. Obama gets up there and he says, the Bay Bridge in California is, and the Golden Gate Bridge, that they're a boon to the local economy. They actually had been a boon to the local economy until they put a toll back on those bridges. Initially, when those bridges were built, the plan was to put a 65-cent toll on them. Traffic was greater than they expected, so they reduced it to 25 cents toll, and that would still pay the bridges off on schedule. Once the bridges were paid off, the toll went away. At some point, they put the toll back on. And now it's a situation where they are trying to increase a toll. So, I mean, when you're having tolls on there and increasing them, that's pulling money out of the local economy in the San Francisco area. It's not adding to it when you have a toll for a bridge that's been paid off. Now, back in 1998, I believe, yes, 1998, they put a toll on the bridges to pay for earthquake retrofits for 6 years. And it was supposed to expire after that time, after the earthquake retrofit was paid for. Well, 3 years into that, they decided to extend it to 2037. So they're grabbing even more money. This is the problem, is that government never loses its thirst for money. They won't ever stop spending our money because they view it as government money. They don't even view it as money that comes from the private sector. That's where it all comes from. And it just frustrates me. There are so many people that fall into this trap, and politicians must love people that are that are just that misinformed. Politicians must love that. There are so many people out there that think that government is the source of everything. It's the source of all wealth. It's the source of all progress. They honestly believe that road is what caused business to grow, rather than a healthy business environment that increased wealth generation after generation, which we had done just fine in this nation. Through the end of the 19th century, every generation lived better than the one before it. It's because we were mostly left alone just to live our lives. Government didn't take as much money out of the private sector. It didn't take as much money out of our paychecks as a percentage as it does now. And that's why we built wealth. It's because we got to keep it. And we even built all this infrastructure on a tax rate that was less than what we pay now. And we can't even seem to maintain it on that. And, it had occurred to me too, because I went up to Seattle, Washington, and in 2012, and there was a renovation going on of the King Street train station. It was going to take 3 to 4 years to do. I bet you the train station didn't even take that long to build, and a renovation takes years. The Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building in New York City, from the first excavation to actually taking tenants in those buildings was a couple years. The Freedom Tower took to build. That new Bay Bridge in California, San Francisco area, took several years to build. I mean, that's a huge drain in and of itself. Just that you can't get these things done in a timely manner. Because you have this property that costs just to buy this property. You have this work crew there, and you can't even have people driving over a bridge or setting up offices in a skyscraper for all these years. I mean, that's another thing. It's not just the mixed up idea that government drives things because government put a highway somewhere. They collect the money for that highway from people, but we're just so incredibly inefficient that it takes so long to build any kind of infrastructure anymore. You need to build it as quickly as possible to get people in it and using it, and that's when it starts to pay off. And we aren't as resolute a people as we had been. They're bragging about that Freedom Tower in New York City, but the way I look at it is that that's an embarrassment. That's a national embarrassment how long it took to build that. But it's back to the taxes, though. It's just such a mixed up way of thinking that government solves problems. Government causes problems. Government gets in the way of what people are trying to do. And government gets so overbearing you can't even make a decision in your life because there is some law that the government passed that has to do with that. The people out there that own businesses, I'm sure, can relate to this, and I'm sure that they can understand it. You'd think even working in a business, people would have a clue, but apparently not. This idea that government needs to solve it. You've heard this from Bush, and this idea that there's problems that are too big for the private sector to have the resources to solve. That is a ridiculous idea if I've ever heard one. The very resources the government has is because they collect a bit of money from the private sector, a certain percentage of it. That's less than the whole. So if President Bush really believed that a problem was too big for the private sector to solve, then by definition it's too big for the government to solve too. And I think this very idea that a problem is too daunting and challenging to solve is an un-American idea. That's not the attitude, the mindset we had when we were settling this continent, when we were building the railroads, when we went to the moon. And now they're talking about a Mars project, but I say we just pack it in if problems are too challenging to solve. I mean, is that the logical conclusion of this? Now that I hear myself say it, I don't like the sound of that. But that's the implication in what President Bush said. And if you look at the Obama administration, it's even worse. There is a defeatist mindset in the very policies that Obama is always pushing for. I do think that's un-American. And I think we really have to modify our thinking on this. Americans shouldn't be the type of people that just give up on things. I don't like the idea of that. How about you guys?